Let's get into it now. A spoiler-free movie review of Furiosa, a Mad Max Saga. Makes me want to say Wingardium Furiosa. This is a prequel to Mad Max Fury Road, which is a movie that blew my mind when I went to go see it in theaters. I was not expecting the movie-going experience that I had after watching that because I wasn't the biggest fan of the original Mad Max. I would love to say that I'm a huge Mel Gibson, Tina Turner fan, but it was that movie that changed my perspective on the franchise and created this excitement for me to go and watch Furiosa, which is the prequel, the origin story of Charlize Theron's character in Fury Road. And I also love Anya Taylor-Joy, who I believe is an actor just on that upward trajectory with every movie that she does, and also somebody that has such a large variety of work so early on in her career. I first remember her in The Witch, which is a great horror movie, but she's also done movies like The Menu. She's the voice of Peach in the Super Mario Brothers movie, and she is starring alongside another well-established A-list star, Chris Hemsworth, who we all still primarily know as Thor, but I would say he's trying to separate himself a little bit from the MCU as far as showing audiences that he can do different things. He doesn't have to just be that ripped up, muscly guy playing an agent, playing a soldier, playing an officer. And I think in this role, he shows us that he can do other things. There are two things that I found very distracting about this movie that I'll get into later. But he looks a little bit different. They changed his facial features. He has different color hair throughout the movie. So it's also just giving us a different side of him for our eyes, but also in the cadence and the way he spoke and just having like this different kind of aura about him, which you have to have with doing such a weird movie like Furiosa, living in that Mad Max world. I think he proved that to be true. Now, what this movie is Furiosa from a very, very young age. I would say maybe 8 or 9, 10 years old at the beginning of this movie. She is taken away from this place that she lives in, which is kind of a utopia. And in the Mad Max world, it is out in the middle of basically a desert where there are no resources, there's no water, there's no ammo. There are very minimal things on which people have in order to survive. But the place she comes from is this place that has an abundance of things. And she is trying to keep people from discovering this place, but then encounters some bad people. One of those bad people happens to be Chris Hemsworth's character, who Furiosa ends up in the grips of him after she gets captured, taken away on a bike. And Chris Hemsworth's character wants to know where she comes from. But then her mom comes and rescues her, but ends up paying the ultimate price and sacrificing herself. And this may sound like a spoiler, but it literally all happens in the first 10 minutes of this movie and really is the overall Kickstarter to the entire story of how Furiosa became to be the warrior that we saw in Mad Max Fury Road, showing the impact of losing her mom and then throughout this entire movie never really having a home because having to go from one place to another place to another place, and how all of those things hardened her, but at the core of it, fueled her. So that is really all I'll speak on as far as what the plot is. But the overall theme of the story is revenge. She wants to get revenge on the people who took her mother away from her. And the person who she wants that revenge from, who is responsible for that, is Chris Hemsworth's character. And really that first hour of the movie is all dedicated to this young Furiosa that you don't even see Anya Taylor-Joy until that hour mark. So to me, this movie kind of felt like two movies split into one. And if I had to pick which one I enjoyed more, it was actually her very early life that I found more entertaining. All kicking off from how the movie started, where it leaped right into the action. And I think what I find annoying sometimes in movies like this that are either in a world that is so far in the past or so far in the future, where you're trying to establish all these characters and all these worlds, I always feel like they over-explain everything, where you usually have this scene where it's like two historical ancient figures talking to each other, explaining all these details, saying all these names talking about all these places, talking about all these wars that us as the viewers, we really just get lost in. The first movie that comes to mind when I think of this was Black Adam. And they go into this entire history of the character and where he came from. And really, when you do that, nothing is really setting in with us because you are just feeding us information and telling us, and you're not showing us. You're not invoking any emotion. What I loved about Furiosa, it got right into the action. It didn't need to establish these characters. It didn't need to give you all this backstory on why they are here, what this planet is called. It gave you that sense of action at the very beginning, made you feel something, and then just eases you into the story. And what I love about that is it doesn't make me feel dumb as the viewer that I need to be told every little detail of way back when. No, just show me. Make me feel something. Show me something entertaining that's going to make me want to get to the next scene. That's going to make me want to ride out this entire thing and get to that ending. I don't care about knowing the name of the planet or all these crazy backstories. Just show me the action, which is probably my favorite feature of this movie. I don't want to say it's nonstop action throughout the entire thing, but there's a fair amount. But if I were to compare it to a Dune, which is a lot more of dialogue and backstory, I would say between these two, Mad Max is just the more fun. And the reason I even compare those two is because when you look at the fabric of these movies, not only comparing it to Dune, but even comparing it to Star Wars, which are all kind of in that same category of being movies about people living in environments with scarce supplies. There's deserts, and people want these supplies. These people don't want to share these supplies. And a lot of the action, a lot of the betrayal, a lot of the tension comes from that scarcity of supplies. So that is why I would kind of compare Star Wars, Dune, and Mad Max. But what makes them all different, I would say, is the tone. Star Wars is more fun and lighthearted. It's big adventure. Dune leans more into the sophisticated sci-fi and has a much more serious tone. Mad Max has a much more action-forward approach to the story. The tone is not really lighthearted, but a little bit more comical, zany, weird, and bizarre. So really leans more into that, what I would describe as the psycho factor. And for me, as the viewer, it really felt like a graphic novel coming to life because all of these characters are so distinct. The actions are very deliberate. And what I really love about a Mad Max film is you can tell just by the colors that it's a Mad Max film. George Miller just has this vision going into these movies that's going to make them so distinct. So I loved all the blues and the oranges and the reds. But I will say, overall, I think the cinematography and the visuals were a lot better in Fury Road. Fury Road was just so groundbreaking at the time, and I feel like all the best parts of that were left out of Furiosa. And maybe it's just me, but I felt like some shots were a little bit sloppy. And maybe it was a style choice, because like I was saying that it felt like a graphic novel come to life, at times that wasn't a good thing. And while we're on just a little bit of negative, I do want to address the two things that were really distracting for me that took me out of the film. Number one was Chris Hemsworth's nose. I know they were trying to make him look different. I just found it so distracting and a little bit off-putting that it took me out of taking his character seriously. But what was more distracting to me was Anya Taylor-Joy not actually shaving her head, because we all know Charlize Theron in Fury Road actually shaved her head. It's such a distinct look. It's such a commitment to your character. To me, proves that I'm going to take every aspect of this person on and I'm going to live in it. And it's going to affect my real life, because if I shave my head, there's no going back. I wake up and I am this character. I go on set, I am this character. There is no escaping it. There is no shortcut. Anya Taylor-Joy said that she wanted to shave her head, but then George Miller, the director, said, no, you don't shave your head. You don't need to do that. I think she needed to shave her head because it was so distracting to me with every shot where she came on and it was this wig. I knew it was a wig. And to me, that is saying, you know, I'm an actor. I have other projects I need to do. I have appearances. I can't afford to shave my head. Therefore, I am not committing to this role. That is what not shaving your head in this movie says to me. And I'll admit, I'm probably being a little irrational there because you do have special effects and you can make it look pretty good. But that's the thing, you can only make it pretty good to have a fake shaved head. It doesn't look completely accurate to me. But for me, as I'm watching all of those scenes with that shaved head, I don't see Furiosa. I see Anya Taylor-Joy, a person who has all these other commitments that they can't afford to shave their head for, and that takes me out of it. I want commitment from an actor. Maybe that's asking a little bit too much. Maybe that approach isn't for everybody. I'm not asking her to go full method actor, which is such an important thing for her character because Furiosa has this rage that is fueled by grief. She is a warrior. She is supposed to be the most BA person in this movie. And that's why I feel like you should totally commit to it if you are the actor portraying that character. So if I had to boil down what this movie is and pretty much overall what the Mad Max Saga franchise is, they're desert pirates and they get into these battles on these crazy roads. Much like pirates would get into these battles on the high seas, they get into battles while driving different types of vehicles and modes of transportation and buses. And they're all just fighting for these resources. And there are some really great action sequences. Some of these took months to film, so there is a big dedication there. But while watching Furiosa, and I didn't have this experience while watching Fury Road, all of these action sequences started to feel very repetitive to me. It felt like the same thing over and over because it kind of is the same formula of people driving and then people coming and trying to overtake whatever vehicle it is. All of the action sequences just started to feel the same. And the movie is a little bit on the long side. I know it's listed as almost 2.5 hours, but I timed it and it's right around 217. And I am not opposed to a long movie, but you have to earn that runtime for me after 2 hours. I wouldn't be opposed to sitting in a movie for 3 hours, 3.5 hours. I watched all of Avatar Way of the Water, enjoyed that all the way through. I feel like that one warranted the runtime. The Batman in 2022, almost 3 hours. That one warranted that runtime. Furiosa at 217, I don't think it warranted that runtime. But I felt like the first half was just so much stronger. I felt more emotion in those moments. And by the end of the movie, where I expected to have this level of triumph, this really big payoff, I feel like if it would have ended after that first hour, I would have been more satisfied. But overall, for Furiosa, I give it 4 out of 5 fake shaved heads.